glad you're here, and we have a pretty packed call today, so we're going to get into it right away. This is the theme of this call is housing counseling in the Trump era. Probably won't be the only time we have this discussion, but we thought it'd be good to get a good sense of where people are at and how organizations are approaching all these issues and the range of issues that exist within our community. And so we have a great panel. Before that, we're going to do a quick update on housing counseling issues that are in the hopper right now. And after that, we're going to do our quick plug on joining NHRC. But I have to share with you, January was a great month for us, and we have 4 new organizations, brand new organizations that have joined the ranks. And just a quick shout out to them. So Haven Neighborhood Services in Los Angeles, NHS of Chicago, NHS of Staten Island, and NeighborWorks Montana all joined in January. And I just can't tell you how pleased we are that you have joined the ranks and appreciate the support. Glad you're with us. So with that note, let's dive into what's happening on the Hill. So Matthew, what have you got?
All right, just a few things to quickly touch on. First is on some of the nominations that are relevant to the housing counseling world. Folks probably heard that Dr. Ben Carson, who everyone knows is nominated to be the HUD secretary, was moved out of committee. That happened, they did it by a voice vote, and there were no objections, so it was kind of framed as being a unanimous vote by the committee. There was a pretty strong kind of backlash to the fact that Democrats didn't kind of stand up and vote against Dr. Carson. Elizabeth Warren, actually, folks probably saw, came out on Facebook and kind of defended her not voting against him. She essentially said that although she had serious concerns about his qualifications and some of the things he had said in the past, that he had assured her, and especially in his written answers to her questions, that he had basically made commitments that she thought were, if he lived up to those, that it would be good for working families, that she intended to hold him to it, and especially stressed that she wasn't confident that if he was not approved and the administration had a new nominee, that person wouldn't necessarily even make those same commitments, so that she thought it was the best option for her was to have supported the nomination. The other one we talked about previously was Steve Mnuchin, who's been nominated to be the Treasury Secretary. Democrats did try to take a bolder approach towards his nomination. If folks remember that there's been a lot of coverage of the fact that he was essentially the owner of One West, which was, as people have taken to calling him the foreclosure king. They were, very, very active and foreclosing at a greater rate than even other banks. He made a lot of money off of it. So Democrats, for his nomination, took a fairly unprecedented move, which was to leave the committee meeting when they were supposed to vote. So that basically kept them from having a quorum and meant that they weren't even able to have a vote on his nomination. They tried doing that again a second day earlier this week. Republicans ended up changing the rules to make it so they could vote him out of the committee. So both of those now, Carson and Mnuchin, move on to the full Senate. As far as I know, there aren't dates scheduled for either of those, but relative in the near future, there should be votes on both of those. I do expect that both will end up passing.
Let me jump in on one quick thing on that, which was the Columbus Dispatch over the weekend had jumped on one thing in Mnuchin's testimony, saying that they were leaders in doing loan modification, and particularly that they did not do robo-signing. They went to the filings for foreclosures and found one person who was one of the heavy-duty robo-signers in Ohio on foreclosures. I mean, they're not based in Ohio, but they did Ohio loans, and they signed quite a few of those. And this is somebody who not only signed the documents, but also was in court, had a deposition where she basically, her practices were identified as robo-signing. There's been, we did circulate in a few states, a request if other people have experience along these lines with One West cases in foreclosure. And certainly if you've got any in your files, it's worth elevating these quickly. This is part of sort of an accountability session for all the problems that happened with the foreclosure crisis. So it'd be helpful if you have documentation around that problem.
All right, so then the other thing to mention is we have on the slide a tax on housing counseling funding and settlements. This is something that's, you know, we've discussed many times on the call. It's come up in a bunch of different iterations, but the most recent one is a bill called the Stop Settlement Slush Funds Act of 2017, pretty much identical to a bill that was introduced last year. And it basically would prohibit including payments to third parties in any government settlements. I mean, that has really broad implications, but specific to us, it means that there cannot be funding included for HUD-approved housing counseling agencies in future settlements. I mean, that's obvious. I guess I don't need to explain why that's problematic for us. So the bill is being marked up this afternoon by the Judiciary Committee. Hopefully folks saw yesterday we circulated, there had been an amendment. The intention is for the amendment to be introduced during today's markup that would essentially exclude HUD-approved housing counseling agencies from the bill. So we did a sign-on yesterday. We asked folks to make calls into offices. And a lot of folks did let us know that they had made calls, and we greatly appreciate that. And we had about 90 groups sign on to the sign-on letter, and just about we had like a 3-hour window of time. So we appreciate folks acting quickly on that. We got the letters in this morning to all the members of the Judiciary Committee. I mean, I expect that it'll be a party line vote, and so the Republicans will win. But we will have a better opportunity to stop this, assuming it goes forward in the Senate. So we will keep you updated on that, but do appreciate everyone, you know, weighing in with their members of Congress on that.
Particularly, and big thanks to NCLR who took the lead on this, and very helpful there. And I have to say, it just does burn me a little bit to be referred to our work as slush funds. As we all know, people would much rather have their house saved and have affordable modifications and get a small check for all the trouble they have. So this is a frustrating place. I thought they did a very smart thing about identifying the counseling agencies as faith-based and community organizations approved by HUD. You know, it's a nice way of sort of thinking about how to message on things like this. Good. Do you have more, Matthew? Is that?
No, I think that's all.
Cool. Hey, well, let's dive into the topic at hand. And so here's my quick opening speech on this. The topic, of course, is housing counseling in the Trump era. And I think we should recognize in some ways that we have a broad range of viewpoints on this in our community, and that this diversity is important and valuable, and I want to make people feel like that we are a big tent that includes many perspectives, and we don't all have to agree on the approach, and we don't have to agree on the priorities. I think we all have a set of common interests that bind us together. And, you know, the reality is that issue advocacy is deep in the DNA of some of the leading organizations in our work, and some of the leading organizations are direct practitioners without a real advocacy priority. and we have groups in red states and we have them in blue states. And I think we may not recognize it as often, but we have Republicans in our ranks, and we have people who support many of the Republican issues, and it's all part of our work and our broader direction. So this discussion is really among our peers about how we approach these complicated issues in our future. And there's, I think, the question about when will our approach, should our approach be adversarial, should it be accommodating, how do we negotiate all these issues? And so we're not really trying for consensus in this conversation. I think what we're trying to do is elevate the issues and hear how organizations are approaching it, what their current thinking is. You know, none of this is going to be locked in. We may have a discussion like this in 6 months and it may look much different. But kind of where we're at this moment, and with the idea that we're going to recognize everybody's contributions and their and value everybody in this conversation. So let's start off with, I thought we'd hear from a couple of the leading counseling networks that have advocacy as a part of their work. Is Lot with us yet?
So I just want to say there's a few folks that it looks like we're having some issues. Folks are on, but I don't think we're going to be able to hear Ellie, Lot, Seema, Simone. Ellie and Lot, it says you just need to enter your PIN. It may be that you may just need to hang up and call back in. Sometimes there's just some issues with GoToWebinar. Seema, oh, there's Ellie, Lot. If you can either enter your PIN or hang up and call back in. Seema and Simone.
So that was a matter of entering my PIN.
Okay, thank you. So why don't we start with Njamile and then see if Lot can jump in. If not, we'll keep going. Njamile.
Sure, no problem. Can you hear me?
Yes. So we have Njamile Davis from the National Urban League.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bruce, very much, and everyone on the call today. It's obviously an important conversation. I just wanted to start by giving you a bit of background about the National Urban League. If you aren't familiar, our organization was founded in 1910 in response to the Great Migration, which saw about 6 million African Americans leave the South and Great West and Midwest. And today we're the largest civil rights organization in the country focused on economic empowerment. We have administrative offices in New York, a policy bureau in Washington, D.C., and we have responders at nearly 90 affiliates in 300 communities who provide direct services to over 2 million people annually. Specifically, as a HUD-approved housing counseling intermediary programs at almost 30 agencies in 40 locations the country. And since 2008, our housing counseling agencies have serviced nearly 200,000 clients. So as we talk about housing counseling in the Trump presidency, our organization in particular is one that has seen and participated in a long trajectory of civil rights advocacy. My own observation is that the Trump era seems reminiscent of the 40s and 50s before the explosion of the modern civil rights era, where government played a smaller role in guaranteeing equal opportunity and social programs. So as government has stepped up to play a more meaningful role, we've also been able to celebrate renewed and supportive legislation and representation to support our efforts. We also know that when government hasn't had the capacity, they've relied on nonprofit organizations like ours and yours to achieve the desired outcome. In the aggregate, our affiliates receive about 22% of their funding from the federal government. When you add state and local funding to that, that figure goes up to 45% or more of their budgets. So whether we will be able to rely on government funding to continue to improve what we do is very real for us. Looking at Trump's cabinet picks, at this time there are only 2 people of color expected to join: Ben Carson, who is African American, and Elaine Chao, who is confirmed as Secretary of Transportation and is Taiwanese. Unlike Carson, Chao has extensive experience in Washington. For 8 years, she was Secretary of Labor under George W. She also served his father as Director of the Peace Corps and then as Deputy Transportation Secretary. He's currently married to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. So it's interesting that these people of color are in compatible roles under Trump's administration and could be involved in significant changes to our country's infrastructure as we experience them in our own families and in the larger community. NUL has not taken a position to oppose Carson's nomination. However, since he has no government experience or any experience in housing and urban development, if he is confirmed, we will be closely watching who he appoints to key positions. One of the early clues we have on the kind of leader he will be comes from recommendations made by the Heritage Foundation and Cato Institute, which the Republican Party have been advocates of for several years. As an organization, we are therefore familiarizing ourselves with these documents, which generally support the idea that poverty is a choice and not a complex system of oppression. Based in part on these playbooks, we're already hearing about the proposed elimination of FHA and CDBG funding, which we know get high participation numbers from people in real need and who are often of color. So in order to remain relevant in these conversations, we as an industry, and we're certainly doing this at NUL, need to carefully look at, understand, and where possible, promote self-sufficiency. And we believe there are a couple of examples of this that we can already look at. So many of us are already participating in the federally supported Family Self-Sufficiency Program, and similarly with private funding supporting financial coaching. In addition, and similar to private mortgage insurance, we believe housing counseling should be used as a compensating or risk mitigating factor, allowing borrowers who do not have the requisite credit score, down payment, or debt-to-income ratio to access the traditional housing market. So we will continue to fight within, alongside, and despite the current challenges, because we know that the only thing that is constant is change. So again, we're really glad to participate and look forward to more conversations like these that reinforce our values, objectives, and allies in this work.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Lot, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Oh, good. Finally figured it out.
We have Lot Diaz from the National Council of La Raza. Lot.
Yes, hi, everyone. Thanks, Bruce. So NCLR's approach to advocacy, I mean, is broad. We cover a lot of issues. And we've obviously, like everyone else, we've been watching closely with lots of concerns to the administration's approach to immigrants, which is a big part of our work, as well as programs targeting low and moderate income families in education, health, workforce, and in my world, housing, which is my area of responsibility. NCLR also has a counseling network. We have 51 agencies in the network. We've been at this work since 1998, so have a long history with housing counseling and have a variety of programs revolving around it, from training to financial capability and similar initiatives. So initially, as we've seen the Trump administration start to form, and I know it's not complete, and particularly for us, it's not just who the cabinet members are, but who is going to be the secretary or deputy secretaries and assistant deputy secretaries who end up filling out the leadership team within those agencies, and we still have some time before that's all going to take shape. But I will say, from our organization standpoint, initial appointments and policy proposals have not been real encouraging, and has led us to think, advocacy, our intensity of advocacy work generally is going to have to increase, just to make sure awareness of implications are broadly understood. Traditionally in housing, NCLR has conducted advocacy in two ways. One, supporting and collaborating with other organizations in the national, with a national focus, like NHRC or NCST or CAP, National Income Housing Coalition, and others, depending on the issue. And so we join coalitions and support activities around advocating around issues with them in a variety of forums. The second one, which is probably going to be the more important one going forward for us as well, is that kind of partnering or supporting locally agencies in the state or local level to incorporate our counseling organizations, counseling agencies, to voice their opinion through letter writing or providing testimony on housing or other financial services issues on the Hill. We want, as much as we possibly can, we want to incorporate that local voice into things that we advocate. We've done that extensively in the past. How that will work in this new environment is not entirely clear, but I think it's really important. And then secondly, even more important than that, I think, because going forward, if you think about it, issues like HCA funding, the role of CFPB, GSE reform, to name it, 3 critical issues that you could add CDBG in there too, critical issues that are going to impact housing organizations locally. I think what I've learned in the last part, although national advocacy has its role and is a must, local work can be equally or more impactful. And so we've been discussing internally within our team, and we have Agatha So leads our housing policy work inside our organization. And we've been discussing how we can increase and support advocacy at the local level. So the things we're thinking about is increasing training in this issue, creating forums to best articulate how policies are, and create forums to best to create forums that to best articulate how policies formed nationally are impacting local agencies and their clients. So we're starting to gin up a little plan for more activity in that realm, simply because many people, housing counseling in particular, is kind of blind to people, meaning that they don't know it until they experience it, and when they hear about it or experience it, they suddenly realize, well, that's a really good thing, because it is a good thing. And so creating that that information flow at a local level has proven effective in many, many issues. Regarding HUD specifically, it's difficult to, I don't really know. Secretary Carson doesn't bring with him a lot of experience on housing issues. So in issues like HCA funding or how he's going to generally approach support for housing issues for low and moderate income families is still a bit of an unknown. We are looking a lot to who he's going to be appointing in the deputy secretary and assistant deputy secretary level, because many times those policy making is really drilled down in those at that level of staff work, and so those are going to be critical pieces. But I'll end with just saying that I think the advocacy for me, and I have been more a program-oriented person my whole life, just based on my experience. I just know making sure that everyone is aware of policy implications from anything that comes forth is going to be really critical for all of us to play, and so we're going to try to do our best to kind of support that general approach. So I'll leave it with that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lot. So let's move on to some local group perspectives. So Ellie Pepper from the Empire Justice Center in New York. Ellie?
Hi, everybody. So Empire Justice Center, I'll just very briefly explain, is a statewide civil legal services group that focuses on some direct services around legal needs, and also has a focus around statewide and national policy and advocacy type efforts. In 2012, the New York State Office of the Attorney General received, speaking of settlement funds, quite a bit of money out of the National Mortgage Settlement, and used a large portion of that settlement to fund housing counseling and legal services to assist homeowners who were in danger of foreclosure. And that program is called the Homeowner Protection Program, which I'll continue to refer to as HOP, so that's what I'm talking about whenever I say that word. So HOP has been a pretty vital statewide effort in New York, and has really ramped up the number of housing counselors who are trained in the state, and it has also really done a lot to bring together housing counseling and legal services to provide a real united front to helping homeowners get through. We have a judicial foreclosure process, so helping homeowners get through that process and making sure that they get what they're able to get and what is best for them, whether that's a modification, a short sale, a deed in lieu, whatever works best, and to make sure that they have the best outcome possible for them. Prior to that, the funding did come directly from our state housing group called, which is known as the Division of Homes and Community Renewal, and there had been a huge funding effort going on related to doing some advocacy with state legislators to continue the funding because it was ending in 2012. And the effort was halted because this money came down from the AG's office. That's how the Empire Justice Center got involved, was through the AG's office. The AG, not being a funder, hired 2 organizations in New York State to kind of manage oversight and of all of the budgets and grants that the different organizations across the state were receiving. So Empire Justice Center oversees all of those for all of the groups outside of New York City, and the Center for New York City Neighborhood oversees the groups in New York City. So my role at Empire Justice Center, with my background in managing a housing counseling program, was to bring that expertise to a legal services group. So not being a lawyer, my role is to advise on this is what housing counseling is and what it means, and provide technical assistance and training for the housing counseling groups. So that kind of gives a basic outline. The HOP program funding ends in September of this year, and we're currently in the midst of a really large advocacy program in New York State to convince the legislature and our governor that it is important to continue these services. So coincidentally, Donald Trump was elected president, and so we are also dealing with that and the potential cut in other sorts of funding for housing counseling. So in New York, it's kind of a double whammy because many of the groups have really ramped up the number of counselors that they have and their intake coordination and the services that they provide. And the ability to completely fund the foreclosure program with the HOP funding has allowed the groups to really beef up their pre-purchase programs by using all their other funds to really focus on that pre-purchase aspect. So it is a little scary in New York about what's going to happen next as far as all of the, all the work that we've done to really build up the programs. And so there is, as I mentioned, a large effort going on at the state level to continue the foreclosure funding. And one of the things that we're focusing on statewide, and I know that Bruce and Matthew have talked about this on previous webinars, is the need to really make sure that your legislators, whether they're your local council people, your town supervisors, your mayors, as well as your assembly people and your Congress people and all of your state level legislators, your governor, as well as, again, all of the national, the senators and the Congress people, the House of Representatives, to really know who you are and what you do and how important what you do is to their constituents. And it's great for us to go, right? It's great for the housing counselors to go and talk about how beneficial it is for their constituents. But really the most impactful things, and I see it when there's a constituent themselves who goes and speaks with their representative, no matter who that representative is, to say, agency ABC did this for me, and this is what it meant for me and my family. It makes a huge impact with legislators, and so I encourage housing counselors to start thinking about not only their own type of advocacy that they'll do, but also really making a part of your interactions with the homeowners that you're dealing with, talking with them about this need to really talk with their own representatives directly as a homeowner, as a home buyer, as a renter, whatever it is that you're helping a client with, to make it part of your conversation that speaking with their representative is very important. So even if it's, maybe getting them to write a letter that you can then, a handwritten letter with their signature that you can then bring in, helping them with that, providing them a template. Some people are willing to really just go there face-to-face, and, allowing them the opportunity to go with you. The statewide coalition here in New York called Home Smart New York is working on putting together a vignette of pictures and videos of homeowners and home buyers and renters who have benefited from housing counseling services in New York State. So I can't say enough about the importance of really working with your lawmakers and really encouraging your clients to connect with their lawmakers about how important the work that you did with them is to their daily lives. And I want to double down on any groups that are working with rural homeowners and renters, people who own manufactured housing, who are, doing that kind of work, because there's been a lot of talk in the Trump administration about the importance of making sure that rural America doesn't get forgotten. And this is a place, I think, and this is a time for us to say we are some of the people who can help with that.
Great. And I'll just say we have a rural task force that's gotten going, and I think had a very good initial conversation. We'll certainly elevate that. And also Matthew's working on a webinar which will roll out soon that would be for doing advocacy with local congressional offices. And we'll have some templates. We'll try to make it easy, but the idea is to do just what you said, to get more people engaged. Great, thank you so much. So Laura Buxbaum from CEI in Maine. Laura.
Hi everybody. CEI stands for Coastal Enterprises Incorporated. We are a statewide and sometimes beyond organization that is primarily a community development financial institution. So we're actually a lender to small businesses, but we've had a housing program for many years, and we've been a HUD-approved housing counseling agency since 1996. We started out primarily doing a fairly small volume of first-time homebuyer pre-purchase and homebuyer ed work, but when the foreclosure crisis hit, we ramped that up. And at the same time, we've always done advocacy for programs in areas that that affect our constituencies. So we also worked at the state level, in a similar kind of campaign that Ellie was describing, to institute a foreclosure prevention law and a foreclosure mitigation program, which is a mediation program that also came with dollars, which has really helped Maine ramp up its foreclosure prevention counseling. So I want to echo the importance of working at the state level, and especially as we, are likely to be looking at federal cuts, thinking about ways to certainly to preserve any Attorney General's settlement funds that do come down is going to be important, as well as if you have a governor and legislature that are supportive of housing counseling, if you can get them to be supportive of housing counseling, that's going to be really, really important in the future. That may not work with our governor currently, but it's still worth thinking about. I think another important thing to know about Maine is that Susan Collins is one of our two senators, and she is a moderate Republican who is in a key position. She is chair of the Transportation and HUD Appropriations Subcommittee, which means that she has quite a lot of power once the budget numbers come down about how those dollars are distributed. And she has supported housing counseling in the past, and one of the times she did that was well, you probably all remember that in, I think, was it 2010 or 2011, that housing counseling was zeroed out of the budget. And the following year, they put money back in, and we'd like to take a little credit for that because we did a lot of calling, but we also did a postcard campaign with clients and other agencies joining in, and she really got flooded with postcards. And we also talked to her Washington staff and her local staff, and I think that she was instrumental in getting the money put back in. So we're hoping that she will still have that kind of leverage and will use it. But I have to say that I'm worried about the overall budget numbers because the appropriators only work with what they're given. And by the time they, you know, if all of these tax cuts go through that are being proposed and budget cuts that are being discussed, we're all going to be fighting amongst ourselves for, you know, little tiny scraps. So one of the things I've been thinking about is that we're going to have to strike a balance because I think we do want housing counseling to, you know, rise to the top, and we want to tell the story of housing counseling, and we want to differentiate it from other programs that may be in jeopardy. But we also need to think about joining with other networks and other groups that have a broader agenda, and think about where we have intersections with them, and can we work together to support and defend a number of different programs that may work well together. We're also a NeighborWorks organization, as many of you are, I know, and you know, so certainly the NeighborWorks line item is going to be important. Hopefully it can be preserved, and working with NNA to try to do that is going to be important. I also wanted to just piggyback on a couple of things that other people said. I think it was Najimile, am I saying it right, Najimile? Who was talking, actually maybe it was, sorry, say again? Say it again?
Njamile?
Njamile, sorry. And now that I think about it, maybe it was actually Lot who was talking about working with HUD and how important the deputy secretaries and deputy secretary and assistant deputy secretary are going to be. But I think that we have a very important person who hopefully, you know, who does plan to stay on, in Sarah Jurek. And the more that we can keep channels open with her and ask her what she needs from us, the better off we will all be. You know, what staff can do within HUD to advocate for their own programs is limited sometimes, but they can give us good ideas about how we can advocate for them. So that's one thing. The other is, Ellie was talking about the importance of getting to know your various representatives at the local, state, and federal levels. And one piece that I think has been important for us is that we get a lot of referrals from congressional district staff, folks that are in Maine, who are providing constituent services and are getting phone calls from people who need help with a foreclosure or buying a home, or, you know, and they know us, and they send referrals directly to us, and therefore we know them. And when we are concerned about funding, we can pick up the phone and talk not only to staff in DC, but to the state staff, and ask them to pass on the important information to their bosses about how important the services are to the constituents that they are serving. So I think I'm sure that many of you also get those kinds of referrals. And if you don't, you should be talking to those district staff and letting them know that you provide those services, because you better believe they're getting those phone calls. I think that was all I had to say, so I'll pass it along.
Excellent, thank you. So next we have Linda Ingram from Beyond Housing in Missouri.
Hi, everybody. Beyond Housing is a community development organization. We are a NeighborWorks organization, and we offer holistic resources and support in all areas, from purchasing a home to education, jobs, and economic development. We have a robust list of rental properties. We have homeownership education. And I've been fortunate to be involved in the foreclosure intervention services since 2006. I haven't done anything else in homeownership except for foreclosure intervention, and I think that that has been of value because of the experience. I've been allowed just to focus on that aspect of homeownership, although we also belong to a housing task force that we participate in that includes a broad group of organizations and individuals from banks, community groups, the Federal Reserve. So it was the Foreclosure Intervention Task Force, and as foreclosures declined, we decided that in order to serve our whole community, we should become the Housing Task Force and include all the other various issues that we're facing. We don't really know, I don't know what this Trump era will bring us, and so I've decided certainly for me, and I have one other counselor, we've had up to 10 counselors working in foreclosure, but you know, we've dialed back, that what we can really do is to focus on our homeowners in our community who need our help. I think anybody who does foreclosure work knows that you're dealing with stressful situations every day, and so from a personal standpoint, we're trying to realize that all of this noise of the stress that's coming from outside is really non-productive and can interfere with our work. And so we're trying to really focus on what we can do, what we can contribute, both locally and nationally. We have a great CEO, Chris Krameyer, who takes our stories, and he's all over, and so he's able to share a lot of stories, and we do a lot of that, which is important. I think Ellie's point of, you know, having community members share their stories has great impact for all of us. So the biggest thing that's happened in our foreclosure intervention world is that HAMP has expired. So we're updating our outreach materials to eliminate all those references, but still focusing on early intervention. Our message continues to be the same that it was in 2006. If you're having difficulty paying the mortgage, we can help you evaluate the situation, review options, and partner in consultation with the lenders. Secondly, we're examining our current relationships with the servicers who are our contacts and how best can we continue to improve our working relationship. You know, we currently have biweekly calls with a spreadsheet of clients that we review with Wells Fargo and U.S. Bank. For a housing counselor to have that opportunity saves us a lot of time to be able to review like that. I'm still really a believer in the value of this kind of personal accountability in these types of relationships to get through the process in working with a homeowner. We know that some of the servicers are reverting back to pre-HAMP methods already, and so it's upsetting some of the standardized ways that we've been doing things and that we've become accustomed to. So to address this, we're keeping files of servicers, packets, and authorizations so that we can be more prepared as we work with them. And third, and this is a commercial for NHRC. We really believe in the insights that we gain from these leaders' call and other messages. You know, we're smack dab in the middle of the country, and so to have the ability to have that kind of connection with all of you who do this work and be able to advocate in any way that we can is extremely important to us. NHRC connects us with all other communities being served by housing counselors. So I think what we can offer certainly is the boots on the ground approach in sharing what we're seeing so that we can affect change in every area.
Thank you so much, Linda. That was great. We're going to take a couple, well, actually take we want to hear next from some leading national organizations that are more practitioner rather than advocacy focused. So we have Matt Reby from the National Foundation for Credit Counseling, one of the largest networks in the country. Matt?
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, so I'm with the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. For folks who may not know about us, we've been around for over 60 years, and you may have come across our member agencies before as Consumer Credit Counseling Service of a particular location, CCCS. There's been a lot of consolidation in our industry, in our member network, and so we've got some sort of regional and larger members now, the Money Management International, MMI, GreenPath, Navicor, et cetera. So it's really a broad and diverse network of everything from local counseling agencies to sort of larger networks. And historically, our service offering has been in credit counseling primarily, but really have evolved over the past many years and have become one of the largest networks providing housing counseling. But really, we like to think of ourselves as providing holistic financial counseling. And for example, our housing counselors are all trained and certified in a number of different areas in credit counseling, financial education, et cetera. So they really bring sort of a broad focus into their work. So as you mentioned, Bruce, we're really not much of an advocacy organization. I am the Director of Legislative Affairs, and I do a substantial amount of interfacing with government, but a lot of it is sort of making them aware of the impact of our work and speaking up where we think that we're implicated in a lot of these discussions. And certainly with the new administration coming in, there is a lot of attention focusing on where the impacts might be. So I want to absolutely echo what many of the speakers have said so far, that there really is an opportunity now to tell our story, and there's really no downside, I think, to sharing the work that we do. And certainly, we were just hearing from local representatives, and I think there's no one who has more pull and clout with individual members of Congress, for example, than the local groups. I mean, you all can paint that picture of exactly what the impact is on the ground among the constituents, and can do that back in the home district rather than in an office in Washington, which is always I found one of the most effective ways to relate this story. So I think that's critically important. For those of us who are at the national level, we have an opportunity to present the story from a broader impact perspective, which can be quite effective. We here at the NFCC have been carrying on a program for a number of years called Sharpen Your Financial Focus, and have really gathered some really powerful impact studies from the Ohio State University, Dr. Stephanie Moulton over there, on the impact of financial counseling in things like reducing delinquency, improving liquidity, improving credit scores, improving overall enfranchisement of people who go through counseling. So that, I think, is a very powerful story, and one, frankly, that I think can and should resonate with the new folks in the administration. So when we're thinking about the new administration, I think it's fair to say that they're coming in with an attitude of skepticism towards established and incumbent government programs and government-run programs. And they are perhaps more sympathetic to the needs of the private sector, or to private sector approaches. And I think we heard this a bit in Dr. Carson's testimony and statements around his confirmation, where he was saying that he'd really like to look for ways to leverage the private sector. And I think there's an opening there, and I think well, so I work with an organization called the Coalition of HUD Intermediaries. There are a few other folks like Lot on this call who are active in the coalition as well. And we held an advocacy meeting back in early January to strategize sort of a new approach. And I think one of the messages, one of the conclusions coming out of that meeting, that conversation, is that there is an opportunity to position counseling as a way to leverage both private sector engagement and to generate a good return on investment for public funds that are invested to support counseling. And again, I think that connects directly with some of what we heard from Dr. Carson. So certainly there's going to be a lot of disruption or attempts at disruption at the very least. And while it's certainly a rapidly, moving environment, lots of stories, lots of reasons I think that folks are concerned, there is an opportunity to sort of pursue some new approaches that are coming out of this potential disruption, and so that's sort of what we're focused on. But I think just to reiterate, I think one of the opportunities is to advocate for the need for a continued government role in housing counseling, and there's a few messages there that I think that will really resonate. And one, first and foremost, is the quality control. All of the work that HUD has done to professionalize and credential housing counseling, so that there is an assurance that folks who are doing this work are the good guys and are being held to rigorous standards, training, certification, auditing, all of that stuff that comes with the Office of Housing Counseling, really, I think, shows a level of professional competence. And the federal government, the HUD and that office are really ideally positioned to provide that quality seal. Secondly, the provision of funds through the Housing Counseling Assistance Program allows agencies, housing counseling agencies, to work with lenders, creditors, and the private sector while maintaining our impartiality and independence from them and not being entirely beholden to private funding, which always carries risks of steering or just chasing the funding and funneling people into situations and loan products, et cetera, that probably are not a good fit. So I think there really is a good argument to be made for housing counseling. I think if we frame it the right way, we'll find receptive ears, hopefully.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. So our last panelist is Seema Agnani from the National Capacity Organization, and they're deeply involved with immigration issues, which are key in all of the issues that are really kind of hitting the fan today. So Seema, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity to share perspectives today and hearing where different groups are headed and sort of thinking about how to approach this work. So my name is Seema Agnani. I'm now the Executive Director of National Capacity. We are a coalition of about 100 organizations around the country in 19 states in the Pacific Islands, and we are also a HUD intermediary, a HUD housing counseling intermediary. So I think for us, we work with Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, and obviously, many of our communities are feeling very unsafe right now, so we are prioritizing protecting immigrant communities and, not necessarily protecting our, organizations, putting our communities first. You know, and given the administration's attacks on our communities, particularly South Asian and Muslim communities, as well as the undocumented, you know, we are planning to go beyond our core issues that we have sort of focused on historically, you know, those being primarily housing and economic development issues. You know, we see this as, you know, we can't really think about continuing some of the work until some of these issues are really addressed. And so, you know, a lot of our members are based in the larger cities across the country, which are also sanctuary cities. And so, you know, not only are communities under attack, but then also cities themselves that are defending them. And so I think for us, you know, of course we are planning to do the work to defend programs like housing counseling. You know, we did what we could to support efforts this morning. You know, plan to continue to work with coalitions like this to really do the defense work that we know is coming around programs we care about that our communities rely on. You know, I think we're also planning to do a lot of work around CFPB and really focus our advocacy efforts nationally on the Hill and support our local groups in terms of work they can do in their districts. I know that HUD is thinking, you know, if Ben Carson is confirmed, he was talking about doing listening sessions. You know, I think we're sort of thinking about those. Should we be planning to engage, and at what level is something where I can't say we've decided yet, but we're sort of trying to decide what the right strategy is. And then also, of course, look to local and state strategies in terms of our anti-displacement campaign. You know, we had been planning a national campaign around displacement and gentrification, and I think given the sort of development interests of this administration, we know that that's going to only become more important. And so our plan is to shift gears a little bit and try to do what we can on a state level and locally in terms of trying to move forward policies that would prevent further displacement. You know, I think just broadly what I would say is that, you know, I think now is the time for us all to come together, even groups that, you know, are not necessarily advocacy groups. I think it's time to really think about, you know, where we are and what we need to do to protect our communities across the country. You know, yesterday we heard about a potential executive order that would essentially aim to deport any, even legal immigrant that is benefiting from TANF and other public benefits. So that's really disconcerting. And, you know, I think like it also said that they would use those resources that would be gained from deporting legal immigrants to invest in our, you know, inner cities. And so it's also pitting our communities against each other, and that's very intentional. And so we're really thinking about how do we use this as our opportunity to build across communities and increase our advocacy efforts in the years to come. So I'll stop there.
Powerful stuff. Thank you so much, Seema. So I think we're going to go over. We're right at the hour, but we're going to go over for a few minutes because I think these are important issues. I know we've got a question in the queue, but I'm going to ask one question to our panelists for all those that can stay. And so, in a lot of ways, NHRC has kept our work to be very focused on housing counseling when we do advocacy work. And on the other hand, some of the challenges really will impact housing counseling and the communities we work in. So the repeal of Dodd-Frank will have a huge impact. The restructuring and weakening of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau will have a big impact on our work. Certainly immigration issues will have large impacts on clients that we have, and also put some pressures on the agencies that we work with. And so the question is do we save our ammo for the very specifically narrow targeted things? A number of you have argued for the broader approach, and how do we balance out this idea of working with the administration, partly because they fund our work, partly because they have programs which we value, as opposed to being oppositional and calling them to account for things that we think are maybe both programmatically and morally wrong.
That's a big question, Bruce.
I know. This is the real-time problem I think a lot of us have, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we have to do both. Part of, at least from National Capacity's perspective, and what I've been thinking is, what if we let you guys do the engaging? We support you. And the broader coalition effort, while we put out a stronger message about our communities and things like that, I think we need to be strategic in that way.
Bruce, this is Matt, and just maybe to be a little provocative, I would say, on the subject of the CFPB, I think we should absolutely be wary of efforts to dismantle or substantially undermine the mission of the agency. I mean, Dodd-Frank was certainly a major accomplishment coming out of the financial crisis, and there are a lot of gains there that we should not lose. But I think it's not unmerited to say that there are some reforms that could help the CFPB be more effective and also help the private sector do more in terms of being able to do things like expand the credit box and work with folks. I mean, certainly we want to make sure that the private sector is doing all of that in the right way, but I also think it's fair to say that many financial institutions are operating in, or at least have been operating in an environment where they're spending a huge amount of time and resources looking over their shoulder and wary of rather stiff enforcement penalties coming at them, which really leads to sort of a stilted environment. So for work on financial inclusion and getting people into homes and into safe, sustainable mortgages, I think there is an opportunity to examine reforms. Now that being said, we do have to be wary of opening Pandora's box, as it were, and what the implications of a reform effort might be. So certainly we should be skeptical, but I think we'd be doing a disservice to write it off entirely.
This is Laura, and I think that's a pretty useful thing to think about. But going back to sort of, should NHRC maintain its focus on housing counseling or have a broader focus, I think that our strength is really in the housing counseling area, and you should maintain that focus, but try to ally ourselves with organizations that are already fighting to save CFPB and Dodd-Frank, and be public about that, but maybe let them take the lead on those, and we take the lead on housing counseling and ask for their support, so that you don't dilute the strength and the experience that we have.
This is Ellie, and I would agree with pretty much everything that everybody has said so far, right? So I'm always of the mind of everything in moderation. So while I think that there were some things about Dodd-Frank that potentially are causing issues for smaller lenders, it seems as though the CFPB has worked really hard to try to address that and deal with it. And so continuing to work on that is important. And as far as NHRC's role, I do think that's important it's the first time that there's been some kind of national group that really focused on housing counseling and advocating for housing counseling. And my experience has been that at every turn, that's what NHRC does, is make sure that housing counseling is talked about and is at the table. And so I do think that that continues to be important. The other thing I'll add is I'm feeling like one of the things that happened is the narrative in general about the history of what happened has been altered. And I wonder if, you know, something that we might want to think about doing, instead of saying Dodd-Frank regulations or the regulations enforced by CFPB or anything in relation to regulations, that we strike that word and start using protection.
Yeah, consumer protection.
Yes, these are the protections that the CFPB enforces. The Dodd-Frank offered these protections, and so on like that, because regulation has become a dirty word, and I think that if we start changing the narrative to focus on how these regulations, for lack of a better word to say in this sentence, are protecting people, and so they are protections, consumer protections. So.
Sounds good.
It's
so
stories.
Matthew, stories, absolutely. We have to get those stories out. Matthew, we got a question in the pipeline?
Yep. So Ken Bigos asked, do you think because Trump won with the help of rural blue-collar voters, do you believe the Trump administration would be hesitant to eliminate self-sufficiency programs for fear of betraying a block of voters that voted for him?
I think that they would have to hear from those voters, specifically that these programs are important to them. I don't know that they know that necessarily.
Exactly.
But I think if they do,
yes.
I think if they hear from them, then yes. And actually, that reminds me, Ellie had mentioned getting constituents to make phone calls and write letters and so on. And I wanted to tell you about a little tool that we're using, which is that when we do our quarterly surveys to clients, former clients, we include the contact information for the main delegation, which is only 4 people, so it's easy for us. But on that survey, and say, you know, if you had a good experience that you would like to tell the delegation about, here's how you get in touch with them.
Good. Yeah, we should do more of that. We thought about videos. We think about photographs and very short stories, but we need to accumulate
Twitter.
more of those things. Twitter. Oh, yeah? Okay, well, tweet, whatever it takes. Good. Well, I think, thank you, everybody, for was a high-level participation, and we have very high-level content participation on the phone. A lot of people who joined this call. I think this is a conversation to be continued, but this was very helpful to me in helping us think about this all, and really appreciate all the good work everybody's doing. Well, we will continue this work. Talk to you all soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.